Hello and welcome. This is Plato's English, and in this video, I'll be discussing context and genre within The Great Gatsby. So, just before I start explaining everything, I just want to give you essentially an overview of what The Great Gatsby entails and some of the key things that you should talk about within this overview. This is all linked to how I would essentially write an essay, and these are what my lessons are trying to articulate. And then I will talk about context and then genre. And yeah, we'll start. Okay, so some stuff about F. Scott Fitzgerald. He's the writer of this novel. Essentially, he's writing in the 1920s period, right? But this is released in 1925, so not too far from when the book was released and the time of which writing. And so, as part of this, we've got to understand who Fitzgerald was and the time in which he's writing. And this is all part of the writer's intent, okay? So, Fitzgerald, one of the most coveted writers in the whole world, but particularly in the United States. He's writing in this interwar period, and his main message is to articulate the nuances of love. And he does this through a multitude of ways, right? And one of the main ways that I like to talk about is through his fragmented narrator, which is Nick. Okay, so moving on to context. Context is extremely important. It's crucial to nailing that A star within The Great Gatsby question. But just as a precursor, context, it doesn't need to be the whole focal point of the essay, right? It needs to be dropped in. It has to have subtle hints of hinterland knowledge, right? Knowledge that isn't widely understood and known, but when put in correctly, it offers a very interesting style to your essay, right? And so, in terms of context, the American dream has to be something that you talk about within your essay, regardless of what the essay question asks. This understanding of the American dream, right? That if you work hard, surely you will gain something, right? You reap what you sow, and thus you can climb the social ladder. And this is what Gatsby, also known as Gats, the main character, is trying to emulate, right? He wants to work hard to try and achieve Daisy, right? However, this is something that Fitzgerald perfectly encapsulates as this understanding of the human paradox, right? So he cannot truly attain this Daisy, this coveted person, right? And so this shows a nuance and a fault, perhaps, in the American dream. And this understanding, it offers a different perspective or point of view within your essay. And these are the type of contextual ideas that we'll try to focus on. I think this is what separates A-star pupils, right, and those with lower grades, because you would interpret the American dream as, yes, the 1920s society, right? There's this idea of consumerism, the capitalism, which we'll get onto later. This just means Gatsby follows the binary, and he does this as part of his society. However, in this nuanced understanding, we understand that American dream has fallen. It's a failed concept, and perhaps this bears another question. Why does Fitzgerald articulate this American dream in this way? And so, leading on to this, another contextual understanding is the society that the 1920s, early 19th century dwellers live in, essentially. And Fitzgerald coined this term, the Jazz Age. And this shows, right, the decadence and consumerism of society. And they were also known as the Roaring Twenties, and they were roaring in their art for art's sake, their decor, their carpe diem philosophy, which subscribed to an intense flourishing of hedonism. And this is articulated again through Gatsby, the main character, who facilitates this understanding and embarks on a hedonistic expedition, essentially. And so this all ties into the contextual understanding. And then we have this understanding of the 1920s America, which again, it's interesting and should be talked about because this is where consumerism was born, right? If we're thinking about America, perhaps the most capitalistic state in society now, 1920s was the birth of this. This birthed this new generation, right, of writers and people and philosophy that you should essentially do what makes you happy, both physically and mentally. And so the 1920s America is on the cusp of this revolution, right? And this is another focal point which should be hinted through your essay. And we will get onto this in future episodes. Okay, so let's talk about genre. So genre is extremely important. We have to understand as readers and viewers of literary work why and how genre is utilized throughout plays and novels. Okay, so in this understanding of The Great Gatsby, Fitzgerald is writing with modernity. He's writing with a modern perspective. And so what I would ask myself, and what I would urge you guys watching to ask yourself, is what is modernity ripen? And what I mean by this is, what does modernity entail? And so historically, modernity entailed in revolutionary works. For example, in the 1920s, F. Scott Fitzgerald is writing on as a precursor, actually, of technological revolution. However, we can understand, as we will see in later episodes, that Fitzgerald's work, The Great Gatsby, is actually clearly doesn't take these technological or economical understandings wholeheartedly, essentially. He actually plays on this more emotional and has this Renaissance attitude about his work. And so we have to also ask, what other inspirations can this work be attributed to? So some critics argue, for example, that The Great Gatsby actually has and parallels the works of John Keats, a well-known poet. So throughout your essay, I want you to really scrutinize this understanding. So I want you to understand why Fitzgerald is writing and how he's utilizing style and genre. And so as part of this style, we can understand that Fitzgerald is writing as a realist novelist. He's writing with this realism to showcase and encapsulate the world of banknotes, which is evident in New York. And so the ways in which he does this is through the very real and well-known examples of society. For example, the Plaza Hotel, which is utilized, showcases other aspects of New York. And further, we can understand that the Super Bowl, which is a real-life event, is also evident in The Great Gatsby's novel. And so what we can say from this is that all this realism, all of this explanation of society through real events showcases the very real nature at hand, which Fitzgerald yet again is trying to expose, or perhaps he's trying to highlight. And this nature also revolves around this understanding of the carpe diem philosophy, this idea of sex, of this newfound understanding, this understanding of acceptance and liberalization. And so this very real and yet somehow idealistic in some sense through its inspiration, for example, of John Keats, showcases a very nuanced and dichotomous understanding of society. And this is all encapsulated yet again through genre. So these are just some points that I would make that I think would really evaluate and show a high understanding in your essay. And this can quite simply be done and quite subtly through some phrases and lines that I'll also teach later on. And so the final part that I want to talk about in genre is Nick's voice. I already alluded to it here in the overview, but Nick's voice, again, is crucially essential, right? So we've discussed that he's essentially acts as the author's mouthpiece, right, in the 1920s. And what we can say is that this style of writing, right, this use of an interdiegetic narrator crucially showcases how Fitzgerald, as a modernist writer, is utilizing this mixed media approach, right? This understanding of using a mouthpiece from a character isn't something we've always seen in literature, right? And so Fitzgerald has developed this understanding, and what we can say is, why does he use this? Does he, F. Scott Fitzgerald, want to utilize Nick Carraway, a character, to show how his life, his own life of Fitzgerald, is flawed in some sense, and perhaps that he subscribes to the same ordeals as those found in his own work? And so as we play on this understanding, this starts to uncover the truth and the meaning behind this text. And this is what examiners really want to see. They want to see if you truly understand context, genre, and how this has sculpted the meaning of the play. Okay, so just to conclude, I want to say that this, while it may seem complicated, you might have to remember a few facts here and there, I think over time you'll develop this understanding. And while this won't get you all the marks, I think it's really, really important to have. And in my future videos that I'll do, where I'll talk about essay structure, you'll see where and when you can utilize this. But most crucially, I want you to also understand that this context has to be displayed through the paradigm of love. I'm going to circle this because love truly is the most important part of the essay. Every question and everything you will write has to revolve around love. So you really need to understand literary understandings of love through the canonical lens. And this was done over time, okay? So I don't want you to stress out about anything. You just need to perhaps read other sources. Instead of watching my videos, you can read some articles. I think this is where I've based all of my knowledge from, or most of my knowledge, is from reading articles and watching other videos. And so you really need to get to grips with love. And this is what the essay is asking you. Essentially, how has context and genre sculpted the author's understanding of love? And what is your interpretation of this love? And then further than that, you will have to provide evidence and whatnot. But specifically here, we have to understand things like the Jazz Age, things like 1920s America, and we have to also understand how realism and writing in modernity through this mixed media approach and further has influenced this understanding of love. And to add, I think what also needs to be done is we need to evaluate this understanding, right? I think some students really miss this out because I don't think it's taught as much. But what we really have to do is to say whether or not this understanding of love is perhaps correct, if it's rewarding, if it makes sense, if it allows for society to prosper, or is it oppressing? Is Fitzgerald understanding oppressing? And so what I'd like to say perhaps at the end of my paragraph or essay is this love or depiction of love archetypal, right? Meaning, does it play into literary conventions or does it not? And if it is, what does this mean, right? What does it mean? This is what I'd like to play on into my essay. And this whole understanding, right, this debate, this questioning of whether or not this love is realistic or positive, liberal, plays into feminism, this all is part of the understanding that the examiner is looking for, right? And so I'd urge you to really understand how context has sculpted society and literary works, and then thus implement it into specifically F. Scott Fitzgerald, i.e. The Great Gatsby. Okay, so thank you for watching. This is Plato Does English, and if you like this content, please like and subscribe. I'm going to be posting more videos, so stay in tune. Thank you.